Burns.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand
I'm actually
Grenades.
the deputy.
I am, we're on the air, Dave.
Okay.
That's all right. I am Matt Connerton, and as you can see, Gary Hopper has shapeshifted into a gentleman.
Shape-shifted?
Well-
I'm sitting in for Gary tonight.
All right. This actually is.
No shape-shifting going on around
This
here.
actually is Phil Griazzo. Gary is not feeling well, so Gary, if you're watching, hope you feel better soon. Gary's running a bit of. It's going to be that time of year. Cold and flu season,
Too many hand
unfortunately.
grenades.
So too many hand grenades. I should have grabbed the hand grenade from down the hall. But that's kind of Gary's thing. I'm actually afraid of it.
It's just plastic.
Is it? I
think.
don't know. That's not what he tells me.
I thought you guys tossed it at me last time.
That's how he keeps me in line. Anyway, so Phil's been a guest on the show before tonight, filling in for Gary as a host. And Phil, you are, before we get to our guests, you're running for state senate,
I'm running for state senate in District 20.
challenging Lou D'Alessandro,
Liberal Lou.
Liberal Lou, who has been on this show, but we haven't been able to get him on at the same time as you.
Yes, he refuses to debate me. So
Yes.
if you don't want to talk about the issues in public because you have such a bad voting record, you just refuse to debate.
That's
That way
right.
They can't call attention to it.
There you go. Well, that's a good strategy, I guess. He's been there a while, so I guess it's working for him.
He's been in the Senate for 14 years, and
Wow.
boasts said he's been in elected office more than 40 years, and I'm only 42, so he's been elected longer than I've been alive.
Yes.
And he almost lost last time. It was very
Well, maybe he'll lose this time.
Let's introduce our guests so the folks listening recognize the voices off screen.
Yeah, so this is, of course, Kathy Souza, who's
Representative
been on the show
Kathy
before.
Souza.
The Honorable Kathy Souza,
Yes.
right?
so far.
So far. Oh, why? Are you
Always.
expecting a scandal?
I don't know what you're going to do tonight.
No. You'll still be honorable when we're done.
We don't even have the hand grenade out, so
All
you
right.
know it's going to be.
Or the
It's going to
Tiny
be.
Tim costume.
Or the tiny. That's right. Did you ever see that, Phil?
I didn't see the Tiny
It
Tim
was- it
costume.
was-
That was before my viewing time.
It was quite something, and the look on Kathy's face was quite something. Gary does a great Tiny Tim impression, and it's almost Halloween, so maybe next week he'll do that again. I don't know.
Maybe.
And Dave Fredette, am I saying your name correctly?
That's
Your
right.
last name?
Yep,
okay.
that's right.
And you're running for?
I'm running for county treasurer, Hillsborough County.
Okay.
And Mr. Fredette used to be the county treasurer previously, so he
Oh, okay.
brings a great load of experience to the office.
Excellent.
Yes.
Now, how long ago was that you were treasurer before?
My last year was 2006.
Okay.
I served 8 years
Okay.
as county treasurer.
Okay.
Pretty familiar with the job and the requirements of the job. So
Yeah. Okay. Excellent.
I am the city treasurer in Nashua. I'm from Nashua, born and raised there. So,
Okay.
and most of the people I work with in the county are still there. So it'll be pretty easy to get back into the swing of things.
Have you held other offices? Have you been involved on
I
any of
was
the other
a
agencies?
alderman in the city of Nashua for 8 years. I was the president of the board and served on many committees. Served on the planning board, zoning board, the whole. That was another lifetime.
So you definitely have an understanding of how everything functions.
Yeah, of course, county government's a little different than local, but I certainly understand that. Most people don't seem to know a lot about county government, so I usually have to explain exactly what it's all about.
How about a little bit of that explanation while we're
Well,
on the subject?
I always start off by saying New Hampshire has 10 counties in it. Most people don't seem to know that. Hillsborough is the largest county in the state, has about 400,000 people in it. And its budget is about $88 million a year. They raise about 46 million through property taxes. And the treasurer is responsible for investing that money. So that's a very important task of the treasurer. So you have to make sure the money is safe and secure. And the county has about 5 major functions that they're responsible for, and of course one of them is the jail, which is located right here in Manchester. The nursing home in Goffstown, the sheriff's office, the county attorney's office. They have a human services group that helps out with people that need help on financial issues. I think I'm missing something there, but those.
Well, so let's back up a little bit here. What sort of investments does the county put its money into?
Well, the money has to be secured by U.S. securities to be safe. Now, the bad thing about that is it costs a little on the interest rate, and if you know, the interest rates today are just absolutely horrible. I mean, there were times I used to earn, you could earn 5-6% on the interest on the money, but today you're lucky if you can get 1%. It's pretty low. But you have to have that money safe. You know, I don't know if you remember about Orange County, California, many years ago, where that county invested money in stocks and things like that and lost millions of dollars. So
Well, let's not do that.
no. Well, New Hampshire has some restrictions on what you can invest the money in, so you have to follow those laws.
And you know those already because you've done it. So you have
Yep,
a wealth
I've
of
done it.
experience
I
over your
do it
opponent,
now.
yes.
What kind of restrictions?
Well, they have to be somewhat secured and fully collateralized.
Yeah.
You you cannot invest it in stocks or
So
mutual
no huge,
funds.
nothing high risk. In
Right.
other words, yeah, which makes sense.
And of course, the other thing the treasurer needs to keep track of is the cash flow for the county, because the money all comes in December. That's when the county bills are due. There's 31 communities in Hillsborough County. I probably should have said that. There's 29 towns and 2 cities, Manchester and Nashua.
And we have a very tight county budget.
Yes.
Very dead down to the penny.
Although Hillsborough is the strongest financial county in the state.
Yes.
It has no debt at all.
Wow.
Hasn't borrowed in years.
No
I
kidding.
think the last debt they had was for the jail on Valley Street, which has been paid off for at least 9-10 years.
Speaking of said jail, what are your thoughts about the things that are going on in there? What is the role that that you play, that your office would play in the jails?
I don't play no role. Those are the county commissioners, as you probably know.
Okay.
There's 3 commissioners in each county, and they're really responsible for the administrative day-to-day activities in all those departments that I mentioned, including the budget. And of course, there's a delegation made up of state reps, an executive board, I believe they're called, and they work with the commissioners on the operations of the county.
You're just responsible to fund it.
I'm responsible for the investments of the funds,
Okay.
the cash flow. Send out the 31 tax bills to the communities each year. Those are the areas that the treasurer is involved in. Of course, issuing the checks every week, payroll checks, accounts payable checks, that kind of stuff. So there's a business office at the county. So the treasurer works with that office on a weekly basis.
How I'm not sure quite how to phrase this. How politicized is that position? I mean, are you a Republican?
I'm a registered Republican.
Okay.
Yes.
And how who's your opponent, by the way?
Well, I don't like to say my opponent's name, but
Hey, why does it gotta be like that?
well,
well,
working his campaign.
Well, we say Lou D'Alessandro.
Well, because I want people to know.
but,
He's been there for a long time.
she's from the town of Hillsborough.
Just mouth
Call
it to me.
attention to it.
No, she's from the town of Hillsborough, and her
Okay.
last name is Bernier.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So, in terms of this position as a county commissioner, what is the difference between you and
Not
your
county
opponent?
commissioner.
Not county. I'm
Treasurer.
sorry, treasurer. I apologize.
yeah.
What is the difference? What are some of the things that you disagree on with her?
Well, you know, the treasurer's position is really not a partisan type position.
So it's not that politicized.
even though
compared
that's,
to-
you know, the county government is very old and that's the
Okay.
way it's set up.
You have to
but
perform the duties of the office. So finding somebody
you
that has
don't
to
get
up to
involved
speed.
really in the political or partisan type issues.
Right. Right.
I mean, people just want to make sure the money's there, it's safe, that you have enough to pay the bills.
Yeah.
And if you have to borrow, you know how to do that, which, you know, New Hampshire, it's a kind of a lot of work to it, but I'm familiar with that too, given that I do that for the city of Nashua.
Sure. Sure.
You're looking for somebody to not borrow money, Matt.
Right. Right.
Well, sooner or later, they might have to, because I'm sure they're going to have some renovations done to their buildings somewhere along the line. Although they, like I said, they have a very strong cash flow in Hillsborough, so that's good. And they had built up a pretty good fund balance over the years, much larger than the state of New Hampshire at one time.
Really.
But I know since the economy has gone down, they have dipped into that over the years to try to keep the taxes down. Actually, the county bills are out right now, I know that, and most of them are flatter or less than last year to all the communities, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, we trimmed a little off the county budget.
Yeah, that was that was a little controversy. I remember that, but
Well,
yes.
we still were able to
Yeah.
do all the things that we wanted to do with the county delegation. We saved Meals on Wheels. That was one of the things that they were
Right.
trying to eliminate. So we fought to keep that in place to make sure
Excellent.
that everybody was still able to get a meal a day and somebody to come by and visit and check on them, so they were safe and kept well. So Kathy, why don't you give us a little background on yourself? You're a state representative. You've been there for
Yes.
how long?
Well, I was there for 3 terms,
Okay.
and then I was away.
So you know what you're doing too.
I hope so. And then I'm back, and I started out serving on Fish and Game with Gary Hopper, whom you're replacing tonight. And
Well, there's no replacing Gary.
no, I'm sorry, Gary. I didn't really mean
I'm trying to
that.
fill the shoes.
Gary might be watching, so you know.
Sorry.
there's-
But I served my first term on Fish and Game with Gary Hopper. Then I served on Child and Family Law
That's a good
and Judiciary.
one. Yeah, those are good.
And then the last 2 years I've been repeat on Judiciary.
Which was your favorite? Which one did you like better, or find the work more interesting?
I actually enjoyed Fish and Game the most.
Really?
It was a hoot. It was really interesting. It wasn't as complicated, not as many lawyers arguing all the time, not tort reform, malpractice issues, all kinds of things that you get in judiciary. Everything.
Oh, sure.
You get very interesting issues in judiciary. But on Fish and Game, we had the right of scuba divers to take lobsters for family consumption.
Okay.
And they came in and said, yes, they do it in mass. It's very successful. We don't have a long coastline to monitor for abuse. Why shouldn't families be able to take a couple of lobster on a weekend for family consumption?
Kind of like fishing.
Made perfect sense.
Yeah.
We had the lobstermen come in, plunk their traps in front of us, they wore all their gear, and say there's only one way to catch lobsters, commercially.
I bet they were angry too.
Oh, they were very angry, and the
Yeah.
next day in the Portsmouth Herald was a quote by one of the lobstermen that if this legislation passes, someone's going to die. So it was
Really?
it was a very,
Oh, I love the
very-
scare tactic.
That's
it was
intense.
a very interesting committee. There was a bill to allow Native Americans to hunt at any place at any time in the entire state.
Seems
The rationale was that this was their land.
sure.
But there was a hidden agenda. If we recognized a tribe
Ah,
and we get casinos legalized, then
Okay.
in come the Indian casinos. But the catch was
do you have a problem with that?
the definition, yes, the definition of Native American was anyone who claims to be. So that was quite a loophole.
Well, that makes every New Hampshire native a Native American.
That did not pass.
I see.
Yeah.
But Gary Hopper was sitting when we voted on it that day, and Gary being very funny, he looked around to make sure there was no arrows flying out of the balcony.
Well, those are the
So
the
that-
tricky little maneuvers that some people make.
That why
because-
that was a fun committee.
Sure.
We had fun, but we had some serious issues about whether to allow certain types of handicapped hunting, which is fair topic, fair to do. Whether you wanted certain types of weapons used in certain areas, it was interesting.
Yeah.
But Child and Family Law was good. We had an opportunity to do some good work, some good constituent service. I had the opportunity to clear up some laws because the regulations were not being done properly to interpret the laws, where people that had problems with the Division of Child and Family Youth were being intimidated unnecessarily.
I've
and
had
they-
some issues
and they weren't being
that.
apprised of their rights properly, so they were not exercising their rights. So I had a chance to do some constituent service on that. It was a very, very difficult committee.
Did you have to put in a lot of effort with Youth and Family Services?
Yes, but we were able to do it because legislation trumps the regs, and so we were able to take care of it. But it was a very, very difficult committee in that it was the heart-wrenching stories of women and men at odds with each other in divorce cases and the children in the middle, and whether there's
unfortunate.
equal parenting time, really hard cases. Judiciary was probably the most difficult because of the workload. At one point, we had 3 weeks of hearings and we had to hear 90 bills. Very hard to do justice to that.
Yeah.
Where do you stand then on question 2 on the ballot? So the folks out there should know that there's 3 constitutional questions at the bottom of your ballot. The first one is against an income tax. Please vote for yes on one. The second one is legislative oversight of court rule-making authority.
Yes.
They can't just blanketly make rules in the court, which
Right,
then become laws.
That comes through came through judiciary.
What
yes,
are your
on that.
thoughts on question 2?
Oh, I think it's a good idea. I think we definitely have to rein in the judiciary. We had other bills about reining in the judiciary, such as term limits for judges, and I thought that was a very good idea, but that didn't fly. We had bills come in about electing judges, and that can get politicized.
That
as
definitely
we have
gets
heard.
politicized.
Yes, but this question too, definitely. In fact, The Judiciary Committee had either the challenge or the opportunity over the summer to help write a voter guide for that
Good.
question. And we have had some very important things to do with judges and the courts. Apparently, our legislature created a way to streamline the court system, and a great deal of the work and the paperwork and the bureaucracy is located in one place now, not in the particular courtrooms. So that to get an answer of what's going on in a certain courtroom, you have to go up to Hazen Drive in Concord. And there's been a lot of complaints about the streamlining because it's removed from the people.
Right.
And there isn't accountability. There is not as much accountability, and some of the judges complained to the Judiciary Committee. The judges complained, anonymously, of course,
Yeah.
that they were not properly able to supervise the people in their own court buildings. And so we did try to get that legislation through to revert things back. And it wasn't successful. The chairman of the committee, Chairman Rowe, is going to try that again. Also in the committee, we've had a lot of tort reforms. You know, the panels, malpractice
Okay.
panels was passed
Yeah, we
during
need some law reform
when I was there
yeah.
before, and now they're trying to tweak that. The malpractice insurance considerations that we're trying to tweak that. There's a lot of sticky issues.
Well, that's good. It sounds
The-
like you're working
The
on a lot of
pro-life
freedom.
issues come to judiciary,
Yeah, yeah.
which is one of the reasons I was on that
Okay.
committee. Parental notification before a minor child gets
I'm
an
glad we got
abortion.
that through.
Thank you for your help on
Yes,
that. Appreciate
yes.
that very much.
Yeah.
That was huge.
That's common sense. You can't
No.
ask a 16-year-old to get permission to take aspirin at school, but not to at least just tell you that she's
Right.
having an abortion.
No, I agree. I'm pro-choice, but I agree with that. I
That's just
absolutely
common
agree
sense
with
parental
that.
control right
and
there.
I
Yep.
think when I was on the show once before, Gary spoke about this and how at the time that law was in limbo. We passed it. We went all the way to the Supreme Court. Kelly Ayotte argued it in front of the Supreme Court, and I was there watching
She
her.
did a marvelous job.
I was there watching her. And then they remanded it because it had a couple of places they didn't like. They remanded it to a lower court. And while it was on remand, the new Democratic legislature came in New Hampshire and rescinded. So all that work went right down the drain. We had to start all over again. So we did. We started it all over again. We passed it. And thank you, Phil, for your help with a huge margin 2 years ago. The governor vetoed it.
Yeah, that was
We-
a
That was a
another.
disgrace.
Yeah.
We overrode his veto by a huge margin.
These
And
are the
I'm
things
very
that's very
thankful.
important for people to understand, that we need to continue to be able to hold these in place for another 2 years.
Yes.
To make sure that they stay on the books.
Absolutely.
So you definitely need to be voting for folks that are going to be keeping these common sense things out there.
Absolutely. And we did pass a ban on partial birth abortion this past year, and I thank you again for your
Yeah,
help.
I voted for that, and my opponent voted against banning partial birth abortion,
Right,
the most abhorrent practice there could ever be.
It's such a gruesome, grisly thing.
You
It's
know,
it's
whether
unbelievable.
your position on abortion is pro-choice or what have you, I think even you and I had this discussion once before,
Yes.
Matt, that partial birth abortion is nothing more. I'm not going to get graphic about it,
Right,
but it's
right.
It's infanticide.
it's a horrible practice. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
is against it. My opponent didn't vote against banning it.
No kidding.
His position on abortion is that it should be basically, his votes
Well,
reflect that he believes
Mm-hmm.
abortion is basically birth control, and that's not what
No,
birth control
but
is
this
all
is
about.
infanticide.
Yeah.
And even though there is a federal ban on it, we thought we really needed the state because legislation comes and legislation goes.
So is
The
that so? You
federal-
mean in case the federal ban goes away at some point?
And ours
Okay.
is stronger actually than the federal ban.
Okay.
Yes, ours is stronger, and the penalties apply more readily. So we're very happy that we got that one. A bill that I dearly wanted, and we did not override the gubernatorial veto. To Lynch's shame, he vetoed fetal homicide. A woman who chooses to have a child, who is 9 months pregnant, can have her life taken, the child's life taken, and the father, the grandparents are left with no recognition that their child or grandchild ever existed. This is cruel.
Yeah.
And it makes no sense. We're one of the very few states that doesn't have a fetal homicide piece of legislation. It passed handily, and the governor vetoed it, I think, to his shame.
What was his reason? Did he?
And
He's-
there was some question as to viability. The date that the the gestation of the child. So in Kathleen's example, let's say somebody came and murdered your 9-month pregnant wife. He should be responsible for 2 murders.
Right, I agree. I agree.
The governor's recognition was that, well, it has to be in a viable state, and it's mumbo jumbo as to whether the child would live or not. So that was where he hung his hat on whether
Right.
and whether it was actual fetal homicide. So Kath, her explanation is basically that, if you're the mother and you're wanting to have the child, it shouldn't really matter what the age of the child is. If you're taking 2 lives, you're still taking 2 lives.
Right.
Absolutely. Much the same as if you went out and murdered an elderly person that was, say, 90 years old, they may only have another year to live. So what? It's still their life.
Exactly.
And they're entitled to every moment of that life.
Exactly. Yeah.
Dave, how much involvement does the treasurer have with the court system and funding the county courts?
Well, I'm glad, listen to this, I'm glad I'm running for treasurer.
Nice
Because they only have to worry about money. The court systems in the county itself? you
Sure.
mean?
Can you explain the inner? I mean, you pay for a lot of the things that the county functions provide.
Yes.
So can you give us a little insight as to what happens with the court systems at the county level?
Well, actually, New Hampshire is very strange in this. The county courts are actually under the state, even though they're called county.
I see.
They're not in the budget, we don't fund them. It all comes from the state of New Hampshire. The only thing that we're dealing with the court is the county attorney's office, of course, the prosecutors, which I think there's around 20 attorneys in that office,
And
including the county attorney, Dennis
Dennis Hogan. He's running for re-election. Vote for Dennis
He's
Hogan.
running for re-election.
Yep, we had him on the show.
So, but the court system itself is all under the state. At one time, the county courts used to be under the county government. It was budgeted and run through the county, but somewhere along the line, they did a reorganization of all the courts in the state about, I'd say, 15, 12 years ago, and that actually comes under the state of New Hampshire now.
Can you give us
So
a
it's
separation
about
or a
minor.
breakdown of the role that the state plays, the county plays, and the towns and municipalities play? What's really the deal with the county involvement in all of this?
Well, I think I mentioned the major functions that the county
Sure.
performs, and so if you live in Hillsborough County and you are arrested and you have to serve time in jail for 1 year or less, you end up in the county jail on Valley Street. For the men, I think the women go to Goffstown. There's still a jail there for women. In the nursing home, I don't know if you've ever been to the nursing home,
Hillsborough
but
County
it is a
Nursing
beautiful
Home.
nursing
We
home.
had some ice cream over there the other day
They,
with some of the residents.
The patients there get excellent care. So that's very important. So what happens is the county, after it determines its budget, the bill is allocated to all the 31 communities based on the value of property in each community. It's not based on population or the size of the community or anything like that. It's based on value of property. So of course, Nashua and Manchester, being the 2 biggest communities in the county, pay between those 2. I think they pay about $19 million of the county bill, and the rest is split up between all the 29 towns. I can't say what they all offer each town, but
What's currently the county tax rate?
well, again, it's different in each community based on your value of land. I believe in Nashua it's about 99 cents per $1,000. It's been about that amount for quite a while. The county has been very good at keeping their tax burden very level over the last 8 years. Like I said, they've had a good fund balance they could use over the years. Even though their budget's about $88 million, they only raise about half of it through taxes. The rest of it is through all different kinds of fees. One of them is the Register of Probate, as you probably know, raises a tremendous amount of money from when property is sold. The buyer and seller both have to pay the tax.
Okay.
So the Register of Probate raises a tremendous amount. And back when the real estate boom was around, money was coming in way above what was budgeted.
Sure.
And then there's the nursing home gets money from Medicaid, Medicare, and patients get billed, so they raise revenue. So there's quite a few revenue that comes in from different areas of the county, just besides property taxes.
So the county treasurer, you're interacting with those programs, Medicare and Medicaid, getting reimbursements.
Right, I work with the executive director of a nursing home and the county jail director. I can't think of his name right now. It's actually somebody new. He's been there fairly new anyways. When I was there, the gentleman that was there, O'Mara, I think his name was, he retired, and they hired a new person to run the jail. But
Is there anything in the county that you think needs to be updated, streamlined, be made more efficient?
well, I think they've done a very good job bringing revenue in. The buildings that they own in Goffstown, you're probably familiar, that they've been renovated over the years, and they actually rent space out over there, and they bring in, revenue to the county. I think there's a court, I think it might be the Goffstown District Court that's in there, and they rent space to them, and there's a few other groups that they rent out to, so that's been very good. Believe it or not, the county itself owns a lot of land. And they sold some over the years, and that's always very controversial.
Why is that?
Well, some people feel they shouldn't sell any of it.
Really?
Actually, I think if you go out there in Goffstown, there's a Ford dealership right across the street from that I believe was county land at one time. And I think the Goffstown Police Station is right near there, and I think that
It's
was
right next
county
door.
land. And when I was on treasurer, I remember there was one piece of land somewhere in Bedford that the county owned, and they did sell it, but again, it wasn't, I can't remember how much, I think it might have been around 10 acres or something. But that was somewhat controversial. Some people did not want that sold.
What is the objection when people don't want? the
Well, I
land
think
sold
they
if
just
it's-
rather have the land just open space.
Oh, really? They
Yeah,
don't
I
want
think
the-
it was a builder that bought the land and
They don't
was
want the
built some homes.
development?
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that's all bad, because at least people are paying taxes when you sell the land, because the land owned by the county, they don't pay taxes, of
Sure.
course.
It's just sitting there.
So, but the Treasury, the business office runs pretty good. It's pretty much everything's pretty much electronic. When I first came there, there was still a lot of manual type efforts, but over the years, working with the bank, and each county has a bank that they deal with mostly. In Hillsborough, it's Citizens Bank
Okay.
right here in Manchester. So a lot of the funds and everything are all done, transfers are all done electronically today versus years ago when you used to actually write out paper checks. So,
Times have changed.
Yeah.
but it's pretty well run county. I know I used to go to the conferences and stuff, and what's troubling is some of the smaller counties up north are hurting. They have been hurting for quite a long time because they just don't have the businesses and the land value to help sustain some of their, because every county has a nursing home, every county has a jail. They all have the same functions. They just have a lot less people to spread them out in. I mean, New Hampshire's got a million three, and Hillsborough's 400,000 alone. So some of those counties have a small population.
Is it required that they have those things? That they have a county nursing home and that
I
they have
believe
a county
so.
jail?
County government has been around. I don't know the history. I don't know all the history, but it's been around since the King of England ran.
It's kind of like the sheriff's
place.
office as well.
Yes,
It's been around.
yes. The county's government, they were set up because back then travel, I guess, was very, very hard, and they try to have more local locations for people that do business. So that's why it's set up that way. And the county, the towns and cities in each county never change. It's always, it's not like a Senate district or
Yeah.
the counties don't change.
Oh, so you
It's-
don't have to deal with redistricting like the
no,
rest
they
of them.
never they never change. They're always the same. The county itself, what does change a little bit, I think, is like there's 3 county commissioners, so they each have a district. I think within the county they change the district a little bit by population, but that's about it really. Most some of the positions in the county you have to run county-wide, like mine, and it's only a part-time job, so it's of course it's kind of hard to run in 29 towns.
How long is the term, by the way? Is it 2
They're
years?
2 year.
2 years. Okay.
Every
Everything
term
in
in the
Hampshire's
state
2
is
years.
2
Is it?
years.
Yeah.
Except for the judge thing that Kathy was talking about.
Right.
Yeah,
What were
unlimited.
what were your thoughts on term limits for judges? You think there should be lifetime appointments?
I don't know. I tend to like term limits generally, but I like the idea if there's some way to hold them accountable. I don't think it's necessarily a problem to have a lifetime appointment if there's a mechanism in place
Right.
to hold them accountable. So
like
that
a
if you
5-year review. If you're doing good as a judge, we'll renew you for another 5 years. If not, you're out.
Right. Yeah, some kind of way to, so that if they do get out of control or if they're, just maybe not quite right in the mind at a certain point,
That's sort of the problem that I see. Not that they're not right in the mind, but if you're
Right.
there for a lifetime, you have no repercussion of a lot of your decisions until somebody calls you out on it.
Right.
I think
And even then-
a review every few years
Yeah.
is probably the best option, rather than saying, all right, at the end of 5 years you're done and we're not going to
Yeah.
have you as a judge. Eventually we'll run out of them, or we'll have so much turnover that nobody will have institutional memory of what's actually going on in the court.
Right. There should be accountability in every part of government, including the judicial, I think. Yeah.
Certainly.
Yeah, we found in judiciary that there are some situations with no remedy. Impeachment is almost impossible. Remember the case of Judge Brock? It's almost impossible
yes.
to impeach.
Really?
And then there was a big outcry and a bill put in to impeach a marital master.
Yes, that was this past session.
There were a lot of complaints against this particular marital master. And after probably hundreds of hours of working and research by different committee members on the Judiciary Committee, it was decided that the marital master couldn't be impeached because the impeachment only could apply because of certain definitions of what a court officer was to a judge.
Yeah.
So all that effort, hundreds of hours of work, went right down the drain.
Wow.
And there was a bill to do away with the masters, and that did pass. So that situation will take care of itself eventually. But there's a lot of sticky wickets that you don't realize until you get into this legislation. And something in talking about the North Country just triggered one of the bills that came to my mind. There was an attempt to pass legislation that would allow certain governmental boards in sparsely populated areas to hold their meetings, their official meetings, through Skype. And
Really?
this was a very serious bill, and it actually had support among the people who are very, very technologically savvy.
Sure, sure.
And I'm not one of them. And so I could just imagine me arriving through Skype 2 hours too late or not being able to do it in the first place. Plus, there isn't the right communication ability in some of the mountainous areas anyway to let Skype through.
Yeah, I can see that being a problem.
That was quite an effort. And to me, that is counter to the public's right to know.
Yeah.
And
If it was streaming
With-
live and it was readily available, everybody could get
Right.
on it. It probably wouldn't be such an issue. But the North Country does have some infrastructure problems. They don't have broadband. They don't have a lot of cable
Right.
and satellite. They have satellite, but that's
Right.
a lot different technology than some of these other things.
plus, a lot goes on in meetings that you really need to see to be
Yes.
there. A lot goes on that isn't verbalized. And I'm very big on the right to know, and I think that
That's true.
all of us should be very, very accountable. So I was very happy that the Skype didn't go through.
There's nothing like being in the meeting. And when you watch even something on television, you do miss out on the
Sure.
law.
Sure.
I think it could be simulcast in some other form, so that the rest of the public that couldn't attend the meeting,
Yes,
or
that-
couldn't
that
get
would be
somewhere, would
right.
be able to pay attention to that. Actually, Dave, somebody had mentioned something to me earlier today about streaming what's going on in the prison, having a cam to be able to, because I think we've had a few people killed
Yeah.
over in the prison, and
A
there's
few, I think, have committed suicide.
Just
Yeah, oh, okay.
recently,
That has
too.
always seemed, I mean, that you can go back 20 years and look in the papers, and it's been a problem as far as I can remember.
I hear that there's problems over at the jail, and I think the public would like to at least be able to, in the spirit of transparency, be able to see what's going on over there and some of these other places. So it wouldn't be
Yeah.
bad that necessarily you're having a meeting up in the North Country that Matt and I can't necessarily get to. We can log in and see what's going on at the meeting rather than waiting for it 2 weeks from now coming out on
Right.
local access. So Dave, you'd mentioned something about redistricting that the county doesn't have to deal with. Kathy, how were you affected by redistricting, if at all?
I was very much affected. I've been running as a rep from Ward 4, which is Democratic ward. I run as a Republican, but I feel that the people there know the values I represent.
Right, so you run as a Republican, you get elected in a
Well,
Democrat
I'm
ward.
a former teacher,
that
so
means
I
that
have some
you're-
sympathy with teachers,
That's
even though
right.
I'm for right to work. I've always voted for teachers. My husband was a career teacher in public schools, so we are sympathetic with teachers and students and educational opportunities. I am very much for homeschooling and for charter schools as well as supporting the public schools.
Lou Del Sander's
But-
not, by the way.
Exactly.
He votes against all those. It's
Oh,
public
yes,
schools or nothing.
Absolutely. We all need challenges and we all need competition.
Yes.
That's what this is about. And so I'm pro-life, I'm pro-family, and I am for keeping the taxes low, and I'm very sensitive to the issues of seniors. I don't want them losing their homes. And
Yeah.
Right.
there are a lot of seniors in my ward. It's an older neighborhood, and I am very, very conscious of the value of the senior citizens. So I think I've been fortunate. Now, there traditionally were 3 seats in Ward 4, and Leo Pepino and myself were able to have 2 of those 3.
How did they handle the slot for Leo? For those of you that don't know, Leo
Okay.
had passed. I'm sure you all know Leo is an icon in the city of Manchester. His funeral was not too long ago.
Right, he was
so we'll miss him.
very
What
much
happened
so.
with that? He
They
was
fi-
on the ballot.
They did fill the slot.
Okay.
But since the redistricting, we were not entitled to 3 seats. We were only entitled to 2 3/4. So there's a flotarial.
Okay.
The flotarial gives that extra percentage to 4, 5, 6, and 7. They're all Democratic wards. When we realized we only had 2 seats in Ward 4, I decided not to run because Leo is a very good friend of mine. And he's been there a long time. He's an icon. He does a good job. And I figured it really might be asking too much to expect that 2 Republicans are going to take 2 seats, the only 2 in a Democratic ward. And I didn't want to do that to Leo, and I didn't want to end up killing both of us.
Right.
So I didn't run in Ward 4. And I was asked to run in the flotarial, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Again, that's 4 Democratic wards.
So you took the magnanimous avenue, allowed Leo the opportunity to continue to serve Ward 4, and you took the challenge of taking on the slack.
Plus, if one of us was going to get it, he probably would have anyway, but I could have wrecked it for both of us. And
Yeah.
he was such a neat person.
He was a great guy, yeah.
And so, anyway, so I'm hoping that there'll be enough people that are pro-life, pro-family, pro-education, pro-elderly, pro-Second Amendment rights, and pro-right to conscience, and all those good things that
Good.
we're all traditional, that will vote for me, even though I'm a Republican. And so,
Well, but it sounds like you're not just a Republican because you're obviously willing to represent everyone in your
Right.
district. You happen to be a registered Republican because you identify more
Right.
with the things
The
that
values.
they value,
Correct.
and it doesn't prevent you from representing Democrats
Right.
and being
Right.
being supportive of the
Oh,
things
right.
that they're involved in as well.
and
sounds
right, and
sounds
if
like
they
that's
need
the case.
constituent service, I don't ask them before someone with problems with child and family services or someone who's an elderly person. I certainly don't know their political affiliation. We're just there. We're there to serve, to do what we want. And because I want to do more constituent service, I'm hoping not to be on judiciary this time. I want to be on a committee where I can make a difference, but also have more time for constituent service. You don't have much time to do that, judiciary. Election law is an important committee, but it gives you a little more time to do, and that's what I'm going to try to do.
Very nice.
And you're going to have a lot of constituents. 4 wards, you said?
Yes. Yeah.
How many do they elect in that
There
district?
are 3 flotarial seats for 4 wards, so each ward's losing like a quarter of a quarter of a rep.
Nasser had a flotarial that was absolutely horrible, and they got rid of it. It was 10 seats. Now, that was unbelievable.
Didn't the West Side have one like that?
We had
they did get rid of
Ward
it.
10, 11, and 12 was all one district for the longest time. And that had recently changed under the districting plan to go back to their separate wards, which it used to be. There used to be 3 members in each ward, and then over time that had been whittled down, and then they just clumped them all together, and then now they've broke it back up, and they've got a couple floaters there as well. So it's ever expanding and contracting. Redistricting always comes into play for the census every 10 years. They see where the population has grown and shrunk, and they adjust the lines to make sure that everybody gets equal representation. And it sounds like the folks in her district are going to be well represented because she's priding herself on taking care of everybody regardless of
Yeah.
who they are. And that's really
That's a
really
little
what the job
ambitious.
is.
Right, right.
Well, no, that's really what the job is. When you're elected to be a representative, you're there to represent everyone in your district.
Right.
Once you're elected, it doesn't matter what your party is anymore. You have to put that behind you, and you have to work for everybody in your neighborhood. And there's so many people that we have that are so good at doing that, and then of course there's always the few that don't, don't
Right.
ever return their phone calls or don't ever do anything that you ask them to help you on. So you have to pay attention to who you're voting for, and it sounds like the two folks that we have here tonight are definitely the ones that represent the people that they're going to represent. That's what we need.
Yeah, absolutely.
What kind of things do you look for in these individuals that
We,
get you to cast your ballot one way or another?
well, you know what I'm really curious about actually is how did each of you get into politics? What got you into wanting to run for public office and to represent people?
Go first.
Well, of course, as I think I mentioned, I was an alderman in Nashua for 8 years.
Sure.
I was born and raised there, and I always just had an interest in government
Yeah.
and politics. And I ran in 1985 for the first time, green as could be, and didn't make it. But then I ran again in '91 and
For alderman?
won. For alderman,
Okay.
yeah. And I loved the job. I loved it.
Yeah.
And I plan to do something like that again when I retire. But I just enjoyed it. I enjoyed helping people. Constituent service to me is the most important thing
Yeah.
that you can do. And it can be the smallest of problems to someone, but if you can help solve it, they'll never forget you. So I just loved being an alderman, and I'd like to try going back to something like that in the future. But that's kind of how I just got into it. I was just always, even, from high school up, I was just very interested in government. So, today it's so much easier for people. Back then, you didn't see anything on television, I mean,
Sure.
today you can watch all these meetings at home.
Right.
So I really had no idea what I was getting myself into, but
So what was the process like? Was it a lot of knocking on doors?
yes,
and
I
just
took
kinda
2 weeks
retail
vacation,
politics?
my first time, and went door to door. And of course,
Yeah.
most people said, "Boy, you're awfully young," But of course, I was young then.
Sure,
But
sure.
Anyways, I didn't make it, but like I said, I ran again in '91 and did the same thing. Signs, of course. And I went door to door, and 4 people were running, and I was able to win at that time, and was very happy. And I did it for 8 years after that. So.
Yeah, excellent. What about you, Kathy?
Well, I was home. I had 6 children. My husband and I had 6 children. And I was watching what was going on in the federal government and the state government. I wasn't happy with all the things I was seeing. I wasn't happy with some of the programs they were putting into the public schools. I wasn't happy that a former Representative Gene Wallen was introducing
Oh my God.
abortion legislation into New Hampshire before Roe versus Wade.
Oh, no kidding.
So I used to go up and testify before the legislature on some of the issues that were very important to me, in between taking care of my 6 kids and working part-time at that point. And as the kids grew up, my husband, a career teacher, was being forced to contribute dues to a union that was supporting candidates that we did not want to vote for.
Yeah.
And
Which is one of the things that I support for the right to work effort. If you're going to be involved in a
Yes.
union and you're forced to give them your money, and they spend it on things you don't agree with, you shouldn't be forced to continue to give them your money.
No.
If you voluntarily want to be part of their group,
Right.
that's the way that it should be. If you
Right.
choose not to be, then you do not get their representation.
That's
You're
right.
on your own. And that's really the way even the other side looks at this, the union side, that why should we have to represent people who don't want to pay us? And I agree with them.
Yeah.
You
That's
shouldn't have to. So.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with future Senator 100% here. And so my husband won with other teachers their suit. But still, there's this freedom of association and freedom of conscience that we shouldn't have to further an organization who's using our money for purposes we don't want. So there was a lot of other issues. So finally I decided, well, the kids are older. This is our government. I'm just as responsible as the next guy here. And we have a perfect chance in New Hampshire, even though we have 400 reps and one little vote doesn't count for much. We have a voice, and we can represent other people. And this is a government of the people and by the people, not just for the people. And I think too many people feel powerless.
Oh, absolutely.
And in New Hampshire,
Yeah.
you don't have to. You can do it. You can get up there, and you can make a tiny difference, and a tiny difference to me is better than no difference.
Absolutely. Yeah,
And
well
so-
said. Yeah.
And so I ran,
Yeah.
and I just put my name on the ballot, and that was it. And it happened. So
Was your family supportive, or were they kind of like, oh, I don't know, do you really want to do this? Or
well, I never asked them really.
They went along for the ride.
After I think the first term, my husband thought maybe I was a little nuts.
Really? Yeah.
But, well, it does cost money to be a rep,
Yeah.
as our future senator knows, because they give you a check when you start for $200 less taxes, which comes out to $187.
Yep.
And they do give you mileage, and on this past 2 years, if you went up on certain days of the week, you got reimbursed. But if you wanted to go up on another day, you didn't, because the state is very frugal. And yes, I agree with that.
Yeah.
And there are certain expenses that you have to pay yourself, and
Sure.
certain constituent services you have to do. So yes, it does take a little bit of your own money to do this job. But then you think what our forefathers went through to do their job. They gave their lives. So I think, if we're blessed with the opportunity, I think, it's good to take advantage of the opportunity and go do it. And I think my family is, I think they're pretty happy that I'm doing it.
I'm sure they're proud of you. Yeah.
Maybe they
absolutely.
figure this fulfills the whole family's obligation.
Right. And it is a citizen legislature in New Hampshire. I
It
believe
is.
it's the third largest legislative body in the world. Is that correct?
That's what I understand. We
Yeah.
have quite a large group of people. And Kathy hasn't just made a small difference, she's made a large difference. There's a lot of folks that in this citizen legislature sacrifice their time, their energy, their expertise, their knowledge
Yeah.
to help their fellow citizens in their local cities and towns and throughout the state. There's a lot of people that are looking out to make sure that the state is frugal. And I wouldn't call the state frugal. I would have to say that the mileage issue was a lot to do with us imposing these things on ourselves, that you should only get paid mileage for the days that you necessarily
Right.
have
You
to
have
be
to
there.
be there,
The
right.
days that you want to keep going up just for your own personal issues that you want to work on, that's for you to afford,
Right.
and not the taxpayer. So we've done a very good job of making sure the taxpayer got everything that it should for its dollar.
Can you imagine if the federal government had that attitude? That'd be awesome. It'll never happen, but
It's
And a
a tough one.
a whole committee shares an office
Yes.
almost the size of this desk.
yeah.
And there are two phones, one for the secretary and one for the whole committee to share. So really, there's not a whole lot of waste. There may be 400 of us, but I think it's done quite efficiently.
Yeah.
I think we should be proud that the people that run our budget up there, that administer it at least.
Yes.
I'm not a budget person. I know how to budget my own money, but I wouldn't want to
And do you
try-
live within your budget at home?
Oh, absolutely.
Do you think the state should live within its budget?
Oh, absolutely. I'd be for a balanced budget amendment in every level of government.
Well, speaking of the balanced budget, we balanced our budget,
Yes.
didn't we?
Yes,
we did.
Yes,
We
but the
got
federal
rid of-
doesn't, but we did.
Well,
yes.
the federal government never really does, and their
No.
way of balancing the
Well,
budget is just to borrow more money.
Since
Right.
you're talking about the
From
budget and the
China.
state budget, I can tell you that the problem is just did not get cured is the state pension fund, and it's going to kill communities in this state unless it's really corrected.
We've been trying.
As you know, I don't know if you know, but this state retirement board sends out rates every 2 years to all the communities that they have to pay in, and they went up 27% for this year.
Oh yeah, Manchester's
And,
feeling that.
Yeah, I saw that in Nashua. Both Nashua and Manchester, it's increased at about $8 million for pension payments, and more work needs to be done on that state pension because it's really going to kill local communities.
And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand is that in trying to fix this for future generations, it's not trying to eliminate it.
No.
You need to find a way for somebody. Let's say there's a perfect example. There was an individual that had just been required to retire. Let's say after 20 years, at I believe 40 years old or so. You extrapolate how long that individual is going to be on retirement.
Yeah.
They're going to be collecting retirement pay longer than they've actually paid into the system.
Right.
And there's where it goes bankrupt, and there's where the taxpayer has to come up with more money over and over again to fill these gaps. And the folks in the future generations that will wind up losing it because there is no money there. It won't be solvent. The state will go broke, and it won't help anybody.
Right.
So we need to figure out a way to transition for people to be able to pay into it. The state pays into it while they're there, just like the 401ks when you're working at a company. And when you leave, You take what you've got with you and what you've invested, and that's your retirement. That's
Right.
what you've accumulated. You're not guaranteed to get retirement for 60 years if you've only worked for 20. There's a big problem with that, people. Please do the math, and that's what we're trying to get people to understand on retirement reform, is that you can pay into the system for 20 years, 30 years, but if you're taking retirement for 40 years, you're taking out more than you put in,
Right.
and the taxpayer has to make that up, the state has to make that up, and we just go broke a little more every year because of it.
Absolutely.
You could do a whole show on that.
You
that.
definitely
Oh,
can do that.
easily, yeah. We got to start to wrap up, but let's just go around quickly. I just want to hear how we find everyone online for those who want to learn more about you, maybe support you in your various campaigns and whatnot.
I do have a web page.
Okay.
It's davidfredette.com, so it's pretty easy.
Can you spell
Spell
Fredette?
Fredette is Fredette. It's a good French name, so I'm sure a lot of people in Manchester
Yep.
are familiar with it.
Dave
So,
Fredette.
DavidFredette.com.
All one word.
Yep.
Okay.
And it has a little, basically my, bio in there, and an email address if somebody wants to send me an email.
Okay.
So
Excellent.
I want to thank you for
Is there
inviting
something
me
you'd like
the
to look
show.
into the camera and tell the folks that are watching?
Oh, I thought I was looking in the camera.
You're looking at me, but look at the camera.
No,
and
I
give
need
the
to.
folks out there paying attention what
Like
you
I
want
said,
them to take away from
I
this.
was the county treasurer for 8 years. I hope to come back. So I'm looking for people's support on November 6th, and the name is David Fredette.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Excellent. And Kathy?
I do not have a website. People are welcome to call me at home. I am listed.
People still do that? Call?
Yes,
on the phone?
they still do.
very good.
Actually, they do. My number is 645-6131, and I'll be happy to talk to anybody about any of the issues.
Excellent.
I am hoping that I will be supported in wards 4, 5, 6, and 7, and looking forward to serving another 2 years if so, and hoping that we can do an even better job than the last 2 years.
All right. Very good. And of course, Phil.
Yes.
You get to do
Yes.
it too, even though you're technically co-hosting, you're not officially a guest, but by all means.
I get the other hat on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Of course, of course.
Thanks for having me, Gary. I hope you're feeling better. Dave, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Kathy, thank you for coming. I
Pleasure.
appreciate the service that you've provided to the folks of the state of New Hampshire.
Thank
Sounds
you.
like you're very good at what you're doing. We look to see you back, Dave.
Thank you.
Kathy,
I hope.
you as well. I'm pretty sure that the folks that have been listening tonight understand that you have great constituent service, and you'll serve them just as well as you have Ward 4 in these years. And that's my focus. I look to continue my constituent service that I do in my district over in West Manchester, and look to expand that over into Goffstown. I'm in Goffstown quite a bit. You've heard the issues that we've talked about tonight. We're very passionate about making sure that the state doesn't spend all of your money, that the state doesn't take away all of your rights and your freedoms, and that you continue to live your life and enjoy it. And I would like to make sure that we get the word out there for the questions at the bottom of the ballot. So if you're opposed to a state income tax, as I am, please support question 1. That puts a ban on an income tax in the state of New Hampshire's Constitution. One of the state representatives that is running for re-election filed a bill to create a 1% income tax. So if we don't get this constitutional amendment, you might actually get an income tax. So if you're going to go out and you're going to vote against this income tax, please vote yes on question 1. Please vote yes for Phil Griazzo while you're at it. Question number 2 is about the legislature and being able to work with the courts on their rulemaking authority, so that if you go into a courtroom and the judge doesn't like the color of your hat, he can't just automatically arrest you for contempt. He can have you ejected from the courtroom. That's fine. But creating rules in a courtroom actually creates laws, and that's not what the court is for. The court is for interpreting the laws and making rulings, not making criminals of you as you sit there and didn't salute the judge appropriately. The third question, what we didn't get to and didn't talk about, is should there be a constitutional convention? For those of you in the city of Manchester, we created a charter commission. Those folks will be voted on in November. And when you're voting in November, you can choose to do the same thing at the state level, which would be looking at the state constitution. So you would be voting that the state might have its own constitutional convention so they can review our document. So I would like to continue to serve the citizens of the city of Manchester in this capacity, work on these things, and make sure that you get the representation that you deserve. You can reach me at philgriazzo.com or my cell phone number, 669-0494. If I haven't been to your door or somebody from my campaign hasn't been to your door, give me a call. I'll be happy to talk to you and stop by.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks to all three of you. This has
Thank
been
you.
awesome. Gary, hope you feel better. We'll see you next week, and take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.